Let's get sweaty.
Steel Paws is the latest project from legendary producer and game director Yu Suzuki, best known for the Shenmue series and obviously Virtua Fighter. This is the third release from his independent studio Wisenet, having released Shenmue 3 on PC and PlayStation 2019, and Air Twister on Apple Arcade in 2022, with a follow-up console and PC release in 2023. This is a Netflix exclusive mobile game and presents an intriguing mix of action-based arcade gameplay across multiple levels where you essentially run around smashing robots in the face. Announced at the Game Awards in 2024, the game immediately caught attention with its stylish visuals and very unique premise, sort of a throwback premise. But the question I'm going to ask and cover today is, does Steel Paws live up to its promise following the Game Awards reveal? So before we begin the comprehensive video review of Steel Paws, which I'm looking forward to diving into, just some little caveats and things just to make everybody aware of before we dive into everything. So the review was carried out on an S23 and S25 Ultra. The vast majority of the footage was taken from the S25 Ultra. Unfortunately, I don't have a method to directly capture the phone into the PC without losing quality. So unfortunately, the footage used, while it's okay, probably isn't the best and doesn't show the game in the best light. I promise you, when you play it, the artistic representation is far, far greater and far better. If you want a more detailed analysis, obviously look at the review that I've written on shenmuedojo.com with the link in the YouTube description below. And we're going to structure the review into a few sections. I'm going to look at the gameplay, the mechanics, and the controls. I'm then going to have a quick look at the story elements of the game as well, comparing it back to Shenmue 3 and Air Twister. I then want to have a look at the graphics and the presentation of the game. I also want to have a look at the sound design, some technical performance, very brief analysis on that if you want anything better. I'm nowhere near qualified for it, so a very brief technical analysis there. Some Shenmue Easter eggs, which I'm sure you'll all be very excited to have a look at. And then some final thoughts and a closing score for the game as well. So let's dive straight in. Let's have a look at the gameplay, the controls, and the mechanics. So the gameplay focuses basically on two elements. One is combat, where you basically beat up robots, and the other is exploration to find money, items, and upgrades for your robots and feline friends as you go through. As you progress through the story, you will unlock further feline robots to help you through the levels as well. And at the end of these levels, you will come across a boss and essentially have to take down that boss. If you do, fantastic, you move on to the next level. If you don't, you then go back to what they call the village. It's like a hub type place, and you can purchase further items and upgrades, and then essentially redo the level with those upgrades. So eventually you sort of pass through it, get through it, and then you move on. It's a bit roguelike in that respect. So it's very simple, but it's engaging. Now, that's not a surprise given Yu Suzuki and all his arcade games over the years. It makes absolute sense that the gameplay is going to have quite a simple element to it, maybe difficult to master in some aspects, but it's fun and it's rewarding. So to fight through the level, you just run through it, pressing square, X, or the touch button on the touchscreen if you're using a touchscreen mode. You kill the boss and move on. You also have a superpower, so which when you're working through the level, if you press triangle, Y, or the relevant button on the touchscreen mode, you will then unleash this big wave which takes out sort of masses of robots that are in your way, and it's really handy to have that in place when you've got massive hordes coming through you, because you can quite easily be overwhelmed by these big hordes of robots. Now, your feline robots, your companions, have their own abilities which can be used in conjunction with the main character. Sometimes you can attach them through the village hub. You can attach special abilities to that as well. So, for example, one robot, if you throw him, he creates an earthquake effect. And another one, if you throw the robot towards the enemy robots, it will then take over those robots for a short period of time to then allow them to help you fight off the other robots before then you have to then kill them off. You can also go through a small sort of joined up team move with one of the robots and the main character. This element of it is cool in the idea, but I don't think it's quite as fleshed out as it could have been. I'd like to see it sort of fleshed out a bit more, and quite often you find that the robot companions will go off and like fight other enemy robots around you, and sometimes you have to go and revive them as well, so you don't often get to use that within the game itself. Just a minor point there. During the action, you can level up your character, which is pretty easy to do and quick. So as you're working through, you'll collect coins and points. And essentially what happens is you'll get a bar come up, you'll get an alert sound, and you'll then be given one of two options on the screen, which is normally represented with a symbol. So you can have like a cross for health, a fist for attack power, and a shield for defense. And essentially what you have to do is choose one of those two options. So you can either use the D-pad in the relevant direction that they are pointing in. So if you, for example, had health on one side, on the left hand side, and you had defense on the right hand side, you could choose whichever one you wanted. If you went left, it would be health. If you went right, it would be defense. If you don't do that, then the game will choose for you. Likewise, in touchscreen mode, you just press the relevant icon and away you go. So then we come on to the boss fights themselves. Now the boss fights themselves provide a decent level of challenge. They definitely get harder as you move through the game. And later on, in later boss fights, you will also be attacked by waves of enemy robots on top of the bosses themselves, which is a great little sort of caveat to those bosses as well. Provides an extra level of challenge to it. And they will relentlessly attack you while you're engaged with the boss. So you have to then work out essentially what your plan of attack is going to be. Do you wipe out the smaller enemies first? Do you use your items to get through some of these as well? And then make your focus on the boss itself. Now, while the boss fights are fun, I would say they lack a little bit of variety in terms of the boss attack fights that are produced within the game. I do think there could be more variety there, but nonetheless, I do think they are a good addition, provide a good level of challenge, and I think are just a fun way to progress through the game itself. As I say, if you die at any point, either in the boss fight or within the level itself, you then go back to the village and you can then upgrade your character as you see fit. Should you get to the end of the game, complete everything, you then get a stage select and a time attack mode. I'd have liked a little bit more to encourage replayability. Air Twister, for example, and I'll touch on this in the story section, allows for some of that in terms of the adventure map it produces and the extra abilities, the lore and things you can unlock here. Steel Paws doesn't have that, so I would have liked a little bit more in terms of encouraged replayability. But the gameplay itself is pretty damn solid. It's good fun. It's easy to understand. The platforming sections on it can be a little challenging at times, feel a little bit floaty, but overall quite an impressive section of gameplay. Easy to play, easy to pick up, but actually you can lose a couple of hours of this quite easily. But then you come onto the control section itself. Now, you have two control modes with this game. As I said, it's a Netflix mobile exclusive. So naturally, you're going to have a touchscreen mode. And also the game is compatible with a Bluetooth PlayStation controller, Xbox controller, or you can buy a backbone for your mobile device should you see fit. Now, the touchscreen controls, I'm going to caveat right now. I struggle with them anyway in mobile games. I tend to use controllers. It's just the way I am. But I found these particularly difficult in Steel Paws. Now, how it works is essentially on the left hand side you use your thumb to control the character, and you can see within the screenshots and the gameplay footage, you can see the little like joystick icon as you're moving around, and then you press the relevant icons on the right hand side to carry out an attack, use your super, use your items, whatever. What I found really challenging within this mode is the use of the camera. So within this you are going to get attacked by hordes of enemies, so you need to see what's coming in front of you and around you and behind you. With touchscreen mode, I find that quite difficult to do effectively. So you then end up having to sort of trade off your movement to look around. And that's not something you particularly want to do within this sort of game where you are going to get quickly swarmed by enemies. So it made it quite challenging for me. I would expect other mobile players would probably find something very, very similar. And it doesn't show for me the game and the gameplay in its best light. However, when you can connect a controller or you connect a backbone, this is where Steel Paws for me really comes into its own. It feels a darn sight more intuitive. So you then have control of the camera, you have control of the movement, you can control your items better, you can take control of your special powers better, and it just gives a much more fluid, rounded and intuitive experience. It's far more satisfying, you get better control. Every smash of that robot just, I know it feels a darn sight more satisfying with that extra level of control that you will have through a controller or backbone than it does in touchscreen mode. It's to the point, in my head at least, and this is just my view on it, that it potentially started out as a console or PC game first and then was picked up with touchscreen controls afterwards. I don't know this, it's just how I feel, because the controls on a backbone or a PlayStation controller or Xbox controller are brilliant. They feel really refined, really solid, and are of the level I would expect. The touchscreen controls, not so much. It just feels like they haven't quite refined them enough. But that's, again, as I say, just a personal thing. If you are going to play the game, I would recommend it on a controller or a backbone. Touchscreen is okay, but just be aware that you don't have the level of control over the camera that you might do with a controller. So now we're on to the graphics and the presentation section of this review as well. Now, graphically, the game is very much in keeping with the initial reveal trailer from the Game Awards in December 24. That trailer itself is stunning. I thought it was really well put together, and clearly whoever made it had put some money into really wanting to give that game the good opportunity and spotlight to shine within that Game Awards pre-show. The game's visual style, for me, is really cool. It's a unique blend of the anime aesthetics from the trailer and the classic cel-shaded look reminiscent of the Dreamcast era itself. So when you think Dreamcast, GameCube games, you're probably in that sort of idea. You have those lush green environments, the Sega blue skies, all of which, for me, invoke that old school charm of those cel-shaded games from back in the day. And for me, it's a welcome break away from the ultra-realism in games. I said this about Air Twister. Shenmue 3, while you can criticize the character models, the environments are stunning and have a brilliant art direction. And again, I think WiseNet with the art direction overall here have excelled with this game. It gives this game, gives Steel Paws a distinct identity that for me sets it apart from modern video games which all look the same. I crave more games that will have a unique art style. Some may work well, some may not, but Steel Paws, the art style works well. It's reminiscent of the old school Dreamcast era and is something I think certain gamers among us will appreciate in great detail. More modern gamers, I'm not so sure, but for me personally, I think the art style is fantastic. It falls short a little bit in the in-game HUD and the menus. Now, the in-game HUD itself generally works pretty well and feels relatively intuitive, even in the touchscreen mode, which I struggled with. However, it's the presentation around the menus that I think fall down a little bit and feel a little bit dated in parts and potentially basic and lacking when compared to other menus within games found across various platforms. Now, you're going to look at me and go, but menus are menu. Yes, I get that, but they create an impression. They don't always feel as intuitive. You can navigate them. They all work, but it just doesn't, it feels a little bit dated. And also, it looks, from what I can see, that they've lifted the menu system out of Air Twister into Steel Paws. I get it. It makes absolute sense for this to happen because it's going to save time and budget. I get it. But even in Air Twister, the menus felt a little bit sluggish, a little bit dated to navigate in certain areas. And this is something that I think has been sort of a theme across the last two games, at least from WiseNet. Shenmue 3's user interface in parts is clunky as well. So if anything's going to sort of need to be potentially upgraded, and I don't want to sound overly critical here because I like the game overall, it's just the menus within it need upgrading, need modernising, and then I think it will just bring that overall level of presentation up. Because I say the art style in this game is fantastic. I have a lot of time for the art style, I have a lot of time for the presentation overall. The cutscenes are pretty well done as well. So for me, it's just that's where it's let down ever so slightly for me. If these menus were a bit better, I think then we would be looking at a better overall package in terms of the graphics and presentation. But I will say, and I'm going to say it again for the third time, the art style is brilliant. It's bold. There's lots of colour. It just pops for me. And it's reminiscent of an era that has been missing from gaming for a long, long time. And one that I greatly and deeply appreciate. So now we come on naturally from graphics to sound design. Now, WiseNet sound design in general is pretty good overall. I mean, Air Twister's soundtrack did divide opinion. Obviously, it had Valencia custom make that track for that game. I really liked the music. It was divisive in, I think, in wider gaming circles, but I quite enjoyed the Valencia soundtrack with Air Twister. I thought it worked. Likewise, Shenmue 3 had awesome music generally, but the music placement in some sections a little bit odd at times, and that's been covered in our previous videos and reviews going forward. However, for me, Steel Paws shatters this trend. Now, I have seen sort of posts online that people don't particularly like the sound design, but for me, I really did. I think it's, for me, WiseNet's strongest audio experience to date. I don't know who wrote the music for the game, but I think it is fantastic. Absolutely grade A+, fantastic music. From the moment you get into this game, the music and the sound effects are expertly crafted. They enhance the gameplay experience, they enhance the atmosphere. The stage music for me is a particular highlight. Each track is beautifully composed, fitting of the environment, fitting of what's going on within the gameplay itself, and they match the settings perfectly. Now, Stage 3's theme in particular is an absolute favourite and arguably the best track in the game. But I tell you what, don't take my word for it, just have a listen here. So there we are, that's the music for Stage 3. I hope you enjoyed that. On top of that, every impact for me carries weight and satisfaction, from the solid clunk of landing a punch on an enemy to the crunch of the snow breaking apart as you smash a snowman. These things are small, but they are meaningful, and they add a level of tactile feedback that greatly enhances the immersion within the game. Take this shot, for example, right now. You can see the snow, you can see and hear the enemies being punched. For me, this just all fits perfectly together. Again, have a listen and make your own judgment on it. As I say, guys, this is probably, outside the gameplay, the strongest section of Steel Paws for me. This is, what, as I said, Wisenet's best audio experience across the board for me to date. I'd love to know who put the tracks together. They are fantastic. Likewise, the sound effects are brilliant. Absolutely superb. 10 out of 10 section for me. Brilliant, and deserves all the praise in the world here. Now I'm going to come on to a very small section here about the technical performance of the game. Now, I don't have any of the tools to look at frame rates or frame spacing or anything like that, so everything is essentially done by the naked eye, and anything that's really glaring, obviously I can talk about. So I don't have access to those tools, but from what I can see, this was tested on two devices, S23 and S25 Ultra. The S23 ran the game at 30 FPS. This is all on Ultra mode, although there were some dips within the gameplay and cutscenes. I found that the frame rate did noticeably drop in parts. However, when tested on the S25 Ultra, because the hardware is far more powerful, these issues were absent. There was no issue with it whatsoever, likely to the brute force of this essentially powering through those issues, which kept the game at a locked 30 FPS. Everything felt pretty responsive. I didn't notice anything in terms of frame drops on the S25. The spacing seemed okay, but as I said, I don't have access to these tools. What you do have on an S25 Ultra is you have motion smoothing as well. It is very basic, but it can give the game a 60 FPS feel. It's not quite there, but again, it's just a nice little extra if you want to use something like that. Across the S23 and the S25, the performance was absolutely fine overall. Older devices may need to consider dropping down the graphical performance within the game. Luckily, you do have those options within the menus themselves to drop it down from ultra to medium or even low, and you can customize even further if you wish to go ahead and do so. So as I say, it's a very short section here, but generally on the technical side, there were no issues with this game whatsoever. I would expect that if this ever came to a PC or console, that the game should be 60 FPS locked. It wouldn't be too taxing for current modern hardware, in my opinion. Now we move on to the story section of this review. Now, many arcade type titles don't have a story. Some do, some don't. It's a bit of a mix. Obviously, back in the 80s and 90s, I don't think a story was necessarily that prevalent to the importance of the enjoyment of the game. I think now there's a bit more expectation around some story elements within games. And again, this is possibly where a tiny bit the game falls down. When you look at WiseNet's previous title, Air Twister, it was very much a simplistic arcade gameplay loop. That's fine. And Steel Paws, as I say, offers more of the same. It does incorporate some small story-driven cutscenes and brief sections of spoken dialogue as you progress through the game. But the narrative itself is minimal. Much like Air Twister, there's little revealed about the main character, including a name within the main story arc or the cutscenes. So you're going to struggle a little bit to get an affinity with the main character. Now, that might be okay for a lot of people, that's absolutely fine, but it is a criticism I think has been levelled at many of the WiseNet titles been released. Obviously Shenmue 3, we know the issues with the story there. Air Twister, I'm going to touch on a little bit, but certainly on the surface of it, doesn't have the story elements to it, but again, I can understand it being an arcade title. And with Steel Paws, again, it's very much more of the same. It's very arcadey in the way it plays, and the gameplay is fantastic, but you don't get a huge amount of the motivations of the main character, anything to do with the main character, or anything around it. However, saying that, the ending scene is very, very well done, which I will come on to in a moment. But Air Twister is different. So, as I said, Air Twister, very much like Steel Paws, is an arcadey type title. But where this excelled was the rich lore that's woven within the game itself. Now, Air Twister had something called the Adventure Map, which is beyond the main core gameplay, and you have to actively seek this out, I must admit. But what you do in Air Twister is you use your stars to unlock content while completing the map, and essentially you get lots of lore, well thought out, detailed lore around the game, the motivations of the characters, the enemies, the worlds, everything within it. So it was rewarding for people who took the time to explore that side of the game itself and then get into the lore and understand things. That was your reward for essentially completing the game and multiple playthroughs. Steel Paws doesn't have that, feels a little bit lacking in that regard. It's missing that extra layer of world building. I think just could have enhanced its characters a little bit more potentially. Maybe something similar, like you unlock a background of the main character, her feline companions, a bit more of the history of why this tower has appeared. I know it's mentioned in the game, it comes up every 100 years and all the rest of it, but why is it appearing? And then essentially then you get that little loop into the replayability, but also that idea of making a connection with the story and the main character itself. That said, the ending scene is very well shot, very well done, and the ending itself is quite satisfying. As I said, the journey could have benefited from more narrative moments woven in, but the ending interaction is fantastic and sort of gives you that overarching reveal of why this thing was happening in the first place. I just think if you had some more breadcrumbs structured in through the game, I think it could have just made that story sing a little bit more for me. It just would have immersed players and kept them more engaged in the overarching narrative while enjoying the gameplay, as I say, which is fantastic. These days, lore and good storytelling are important in video games, and a game like this, which isn't quite a pure arcade title, needs something to sort of make it sing in that sense. Air Twister, which is, I would argue, more of a pure arcade title, had more of this, and that's where there's a little bit of imbalance. And as we know for like future Shenmue games as well, the story is massively important, especially in a Shenmue 4. So as I say, mixed bag here. Some good bits, some bad bits. The ending scene is very, very good. Just needed a little bit more to sort of push it through to the next level and maybe keep players engaged through the replayability cycles in that sense as well. Now I come on to a section that's clearly related to this channel, Shenmue Dojo. Shenmue Easter eggs. Now, you're going to be looking at me going, why are you talking about Shenmue Easter eggs in Steel Paws? Why would it contain any reference to anything Shenmue? It's a game about feline robots and battering your way through a mysterious tower. However, there is a pleasant surprise that there are some nods to the Shenmue series, and some are pretty hidden in plain sight. I may not have got all of them, but this is something that I really enjoyed to see. So when you go and purchase some of your special moves, you will see Elbow Assault is particularly one that comes up, and Spinning Back Fist. Also, within the game itself, you can see that Twin Palm Strike is being used. and also the body check. Now these are all lifted from Shenmue 3. So what Wisenet have done here, and it sort of leads me on, is from a technical standpoint, the battle engine in Steel Paws seems to be a stripped down, simplified version of the Shenmue 3 fighting system. It's essentially been simplified to fit the game's arcade style gameplay, where you're essentially using 2 buttons to attack, square, X, or your touch button to punch and use your basic move, triangle, Y, or the touch button to use your more powerful attack move, which obviously clears lots of the robots out. And it translates surprisingly well to this action-packed format. The stripped-back version of the Shenmue 3 engine works really well. The motions are the same as well. So again, they've saved budget, they've saved time here. They've been really, really smart with how they do this. The fluidity of the movement works really well. The combos work fantastically. I know people struggle with the Shenmue 3 engine to a point, but actually if you got used to it and understood it, there's some well-timed combos in there that strung together really well, and Steel Paws here is no different, albeit on a more simplistic level. Likewise with it, that the enemy interactions with the combos are fantastic, and it gives Steel Paws sort of a distinct feel, but a familiar combat feel all the same. And if you enjoyed the Shenmue 3 combat engine, I think you will pick this up really, really quickly. And also, long-time Yu Suzuki fans will likely appreciate it. It feels more rounded, it feels more solid, and it feels more satisfying. And I think they've learnt from the elements of Shenmue 3's engine, polished some of that, and then have implemented into Steel Paws really, really well. So yes, there are, as I say, Shenmue Easter eggs in this game. Like I say, I may not have got them all. I hope I have. But if any others are there, do let me know in the comments. I'm happy to pick those up as we go. But yes, there are some little Shenmue Easter eggs within Steel Paws, so go and check them out if you haven't done so already. So now come on to the final thoughts of the game overall. Now, I've said this all through the video, I think it is a solid gameplay experience. The gameplay loop is fantastic. Mechanically, it works really well. It is addictive, it's fun, and it is rewarding to master. The game itself, as I said, falls a little bit short in some of the storytelling, the menu presentation, and also the overly difficult touchscreen controls, which like I said, found pretty challenging. So it is a mixed bag here, but I will go out and say again, the art design is fantastic. Again, I think Wisenet generally nail the art design of all their games. Shenmue 3, they did pretty well with the environments. Air Twister's got a nice art design to it, and Steel Paws is no different. The art design for me stands out, it's fantastic, and throws itself back to the Dreamcast GameCube era, which we all miss. Likewise, the sound design in this game is absolutely, for me, fantastic. It is their best sound experience to date, and they deserve all the credit in the world for a fantastic sound experience. So, giving it an overall score, I will give it a 7.5 out of 10. Definitely some room for improvement, but definitely worth the player's time. This is the sort of game you can spend 20 minutes on, or you could accidentally spend 2 hours on it and you wouldn't have even realised, but you're having a good time, and that's the whole point of this. Now, in order to play this game, currently it is a Netflix exclusive over on Android and iOS, but there is hope that it could make its way to console and PC eventually. If you consider Air Twister's barometer there, it had a year on Apple Arcade before it then came over to console and PC. So we should be keeping a date on the release date, which is March 25th, 2025, that maybe in 2026, March 25th, 2026, that then there could be a 1-year exclusivity deal that may end, and maybe the game will come over to console and PC. And if it does, I think it will give it a much wider market. I don't know how wide the Netflix market is. Obviously, they've paid for exclusivity here, which is fantastic for Wisenet. It keeps the doors open, but it does restrict things a little bit for players to be able to pick up this game if you don't have a Netflix account or don't have the relevant devices to play it on. So as I say, it is a solid 7.5 out of 10 experience. Go and check it out if you haven't done so already. It's relatively easy to download. All you need is a Netflix account and an Android or iOS device. And it is unfortunately locked to Netflix at this point in time. That is the end of this video review. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. Do drop me some comments below, guys, if there's anything I missed, anything I didn't pick up that you wanted picked up within this. And I may do this sort of format of reviews going forward as we move through. Don't forget, as always, guys, give us a like, share, subscribe on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and all the usual places you can find us. Thank you for sticking with this video review, and I will be back with a video in the not too distant future. But for now, guys, take care and have a good one, and enjoy Steel Paws.